Okay, we'll start. So, hi everyone. Thanks for coming. Tonight, what I want to do um, is last week we stopped off at the point where basically David is in the house of the king. He's in the king's family. He's the king's son-in-law, and now he's realizing he's playing for him his instrument, his music for when he has the ruach ra'ah, and he realizes that Shaul wants to kill him. It's not a good situation for him, so he runs away with the help of Michal. Yonatan tries to help, and he runs. We left him off running to find help with Shmuel and Nayot, and he runs away again. And now we're meeting him now when he meets with Yonatan to discuss what's going on, because right now we're at a little bit of a crossroad, because everyone else at this point right now, for another few minutes, so to speak, they're thinking that Shaul has a ruach ra'ah, he has his paranoia, but it's not a consistent thing, and if we deal with it, he'll be okay. And David's realizing very quickly, because it's his own life more than others, that this is not, this is the new reality for him. And he meets with, before I actually go into that, I want to show one thing. One second. Where is one second? Let me get okay. So basically, what I want to talk about now is that we're going to see the rest of David's life, the rest of Shaul's life. Shaul's going to be chasing David, and this is his new reality is going to be that, and we're going to see David is running from Shaul, and we're going to see who helps him. It's going to split up the nation of who's helping David, and we have to realize this is a very hard situation, because even though the nation is going to very soon realize that Shaul is not the king he was and he needs to be, and quickly they're realizing David will take that place, it becomes evident to the nation. However, Shaul is still the king. Shaul is the is ruling, even though he's crazy at this point, so to speak, but he's not in his right mind. And they're worried that if they help David, what the ramifications will be for them, because we're going to see what happens is that if you help David, it is not so good for you. So we're going to see about that. So the nation is sort of torn here about what to do. We're going to see how that plays out. We're going to see that David has opportunities to kill Shaul, and how he responds. He obviously doesn't kill Shaul. We're going to see how that plays out, and we're going to end up seeing how all this running ends up having David be by the Plishtim, his enemies. But we're going to see a little bit of a theme that comes up is the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So he gets help from them. We're going to see. Just a few characters of importance to give context to what's going on. We have Yonatan, who we obviously met before, the son of Shaul, and we're going to see now there's a sort of I don't want to say like triangle, but there's a sort of mirroring of David, Yonatan, and Shaul, and how they all play off each other. So we're going to see that, which I think is a very interesting dynamic, because we have David as the new king, Shaul as the king now, and Yonatan, the one who should be king next, but he's not going to be king because of Shaul's sin, and how that all plays into those relationships. We're going to have Doeg HaEdomi, who is an advisor of Shaul, who we're going to see plays a very important role in this whole escape of David. And we're going to have Yoav and Avishai, who are the Bnei Seruya. They're two brothers. There's a third one, Asael. He doesn't come in right now. And they are the generals and military advisors of David. And we're going to see he butts heads with them. We're not going to talk about it so much now, but they're going to be important. And Avner is the military advisor, the Sar Sava of Shaul. And then we're going to have two Kohanim that are important, Achimelech and Evyatar, his son, and Achish, the king of Gath. So that's a lot of names. We're going to get all acquainted with them, but I wanted to give a little context. Another thing I want to show you before we move on is the fact that, I was actually thinking when I was preparing this class that I could do this whole thing in one lesson, and I was like, no, it's too much info, it's too many things. I'm just going to make this bigger for you for a second, so you could maybe get a little bit of a context. This is actually, it's a picture I took of a book that I have called the Atlas da Mikra, highly recommended book. It's I think they make it in English now, if I'm not mistaken. I have it in Hebrew, but I think they also make it in English. What it is basically, it takes different stories and different time periods in the Tanakh, and it attributes maps to them, so you see visually what was going on. So I'm not going to go through all this now, but I just wanted to like put it out there as a visual for those people that are visual, because just to see what was going on. This is a zoom in of southern Israel, of Midbar Yehuda, near, as you see here, Yam HaMelach and the Mediterranean, right? You see that whole in the desert area, and this is going to be basically where David and Shaul are running this whole time. And as you see by the arrows, it's a lot of circular, it's a lot of back and forth. He ends up, on the coastal area with the Plishtim. He ends up in the middle of the desert, and this is all what's going to be going on in the next chunk of the book. And what I find very for me very telling about all of this is through this whole chase, we see the characters of all the main people in the stories develop, and we'll see how Shaul is basically losing his credibility as king, and David is building it. And we're going to also see, which I think is the most important part of the whole thing, is we're going to see how David gets to points where he's not so perfect, and he redeems himself from them, which is a quality that Shaul doesn't have. So we're going to, that was a little bit of a long-winded introduction to the fact that we're going to dive into this whole big unit of the story of the chasings. And just for a little bit of a visual, this is like, I tried to make myself notes of everything was going on, and you just see all the places and all the pinpoints. So it's just a lot of things going on, and I think just the fact in general, it gives us a feel of all the tension that was going on in the nation at this time. Okay, so now let's jump into the let's jump into the story that we're going to be talking about now. In the beginning is the meal at Rosh Chodesh. Okay, so again, what's going on right now is David is realizing that his life is in danger. This is not a ruach ra'ah thing. This is the new reality of his relationship with Shaul, and he has to he has to save himself and protect his own life. And he's trying to get Yonatan to realize this. And he sees Yonatan, he runs away, and he meets with Yonatan. He meets with Yonatan secretly, and he tells him, and he says, and he's basically telling him, why does your father want to kill me? What did I do? How I can't live basically not like, I can't live like this. I don't know what's going on. What did I ever do to him? And Yonatan is still of the belief that Shaul is he's okay. Like, David will play for him and control the ruach ra'ah. And Yonatan is not fully convinced at this point of the danger David is in. And David he's sort of, I was reading, I forgot where I read this, but this whole situation right now with the meal of Rosh Chodesh, which we're going to go into right now, I forgot where I read it, but the commentator was saying, I wish I could attribute to it but he was saying how this whole thing seems like it's a sign for David, but really it's David putting a sign for Yonatan to prove to him the danger he's in. So basically what happens is there's going to be every month, the Rosh Chodesh, they would do this big seudah in the king's court, right? It's the royal procedures, the royal meals. It was a whole, to do, and they're making this meal. And David, being the son-in-law of the king and being one of his advisors, he's expected to be there. So him and Yonatan make this plan, and they say, okay, I'm not going to come to the meal. And if your father gets angered by this, meaning Shaul gets angered by this, it's a sign that we're done, and I have to run away, and there's no hope, and I'm not going to be safe, and I have to get out of the palace. And if he's okay with it, and he's then it's a sign that it is okay, and I could be, still be involved in the palace. And they even make the sign with Yonatan David says, when you tell me this, make a sign with the arrows that if you shoot your arrow far, that means I have to run away, and if I shoot the arrow close, then it means I'm okay, because he's worried that if it is bad, that he's gonna not be able to tell him. So now they make this whole sign. They also Yonatan still keeps saying this doesn't mean, like, he doesn't really believe that this is as bad as it is, and he goes. And now they start the meal of Rosh Chodesh. Vayishav HaMelech al moshavo kepam, and Moshav HaKid, he sits in his place. Vayakom Yonatan vayishev Amned mitzad Shaul vayifaked makom David. So they're basically saying the layout, everything's very meticulous in the king's house. Shaul sits here, Yonatan, his firstborn, sits there, Abner, his general, sits there, and David's seat is noticeably empty. Now, on the first day, Shaul doesn't say anything because he thinks it might just be happenstance. Right? Maybe they're making a korban, so they have to be in tahara. They can't be tameh. So he's saying maybe he just wasn't tahor, so he couldn't come. But it doesn't end there, right? The next day, he sees that David's place is empty again, and now he's suspicious. And now he's like, what's going on? So he tells Yonatan, now he goes to Yonatan. Why did, by the way, this is very common theme in Tanakh, when you're insulting someone, or in a derogatory term, when you're calling someone, you don't call them by their name, you call them Ben Yishai, the son of so and so. So he's saying, well, Bob Ben Yishai, he doesn't even call him his name. So he's saying, why did he not come to yesterday and today? What happened? And I could imagine, obviously I wasn't there, but you sort of imagine he has a tone with him. He's annoyed about this. It's not, Yonatan is already, I would think he's already feeling the tension in Shaul's voice. And I would feel, I'm obviously projecting this, but I would feel that Shaul was holding this in the whole first day, that now that it's the second day and he's able to say something, it's like the first thing he's saying is, where is he? What's going on, Yonatan? Tell me what's going on. So Yonatan gives him this whole excuse that David and him discussed prior, and he says, no, David asked me for permission to go have the meal with his family, and it's his family, and his brothers called for him and said they were doing a family sacrifice, and Yonatan is trying to sort of say he was pressured by his brothers, and I could slip away. By the way, the word imalta, it's interesting that he used it here because it has a connotation of running away or slipping away, like in a little bit of a fearful way also, which we see also. And he tells him his brothers sort of pressured him to go, and I gave him permission as the son of the king. I gave him permission to go. Now Shaul does not like this. He gets furious at Yonatan, right? He's projecting his anger about David's situation on his son Yonatan, and he destroys him. Okay, he says, Ben avat hamardut halo yadati ki bochet atal levenishai levashtecha levoshet arvat imecha. He totally just says he's calling him the son of a rebellious person. You're rebelling. Why are you helping Ben Yishai? Shaul is saying now to Yonatan, he's realizing and saying this, as long as Ben Yishai, as David's alive, your malchut cannot happen, right? He knows that, because if we think about it, David is not really a threat in reality to Shaul. He's a threat to Yonatan, because Shaul, even though his malchut is not going to continue with his lineage, Shmuel and God never told him you're going to die. Like, he's finishing out his reign as king. It's more of a punishment, so to speak, or a consequence to Yonatan, who's the heir apparent, who's not going to be the next king. And he says, we have to kill him. Like, he wants to protect his son. And Yonatan says, but what did he do? He didn't do anything. Yonatan is like trying to defend him. And then Shaul takes his sword, his spear, which he threw at, we spoke about, he threw at David 2 times prior to this when he was playing his music, and he throws it to hit Yonatan out of his anger. And now Yonatan obviously realizes point blank his father wants to kill David. There's no turning back, and Yonatan leaves the seudah. He doesn't eat for the meal because he's in mourning, so to speak, over this new reality of what he's going to deal with David and his father. And he's not, he's mourning the situation of, this is the reality that we're dealing with. Then he goes to tell this to David, and he does the signs with the arrows. However, they end up talking, and we see that the motion takes charge, and they want to speak to each other, and we see that they make a brit. This is 2 different times they made a brit. They actually made a brit 3 times, but they make a brit with each other, right? That they'll help each other, and then they make a brit with also their children, right? With that you should protect our children. Jonathan wants, that they should protect the children, because Jonathan realizes that David will be king, and he wants him to, a lot of the kings, when they would come to power, they would destroy the old people in the old monarch's family. So Jonathan's saying, please don't do that. Hashem yeh beni ubenecha uben zari uben zarecha ad olam, that will be connected forever. And vayakom vayelech Jonathan ba'ha'ir, and Jonathan leaves. So now, when you read this story, and you see it from a little bit, like, to digest this whole to not digest, but to dissect a little bit and delve deeper in this whole David, Jonathan, Shaul relationship, we see, and we spoke about this a little before with the Plishtim and their view to the war, and David and Jonathan being very in sync with their values and their views, as opposed to Jonathan and David and Shaul. So you could sort of ask yourself and say, why isn't Jonathan, who sees the fact that David is on the right path and his father's not seeing the reality, why doesn't he go with David? And we see that there's not blaming Jonathan, because it is his father, it is the malchut. It's not so easy to jump away from that. However, we do see that there is, and not to blame, but just to sort of get in their heads a little bit. If Jonathan would have, like here, I put it in red, I bolded it in red. Jonathan goes back to the city, and David will now run away. But it's almost, you could sort of think of this alternate reality. If Jonathan decided to run away with David and defy his father, how that reality could have changed things. I don't know, maybe for better, for worse, with the whole relationship with Shaul, but it's just a different way to think about their relationship. We also see that Jonathan and David, they love each other, but they're also suspicious of each other. Well, more David to Jonathan, because we see they make brits, and they also have shvuot. They have covenants, and they also have promises. And we see that the covenants are more of a protection, and the shvuot are more out of the relationship. Because David, if you're thinking from David's perspective, how could he really fully trust Jonathan? He doesn't, and we could think that we'll see throughout the rest of the story. There's no way of really telling if Jonathan was running with Shaul after David. He's one of his advisors. He's one of his warriors. We don't know that maybe Jonathan is running this whole time with Shaul against David, even though he's secretly helping him. So we don't really know all the details to that, obviously, but it's just an interesting perspective to think about the dynamics of what was happening, that Shaul sort of knew Jonathan was a double agent, but he was in the house of the king, and David sort of knew that also, and how that all played out. So now they do make this covenant to each other and this shua with each other, that they'll protect each other, and then David goes on, and he realizes at this point, before this, and we might say it's weird, but before this, it seems like even throughout the many times that Shaul was trying to kill David, he was going back into the house of the king. And at this point, it seems like now we're done. And he runs away. I'm not going to go so into this. He runs to Nov, which is the city of the Kohanim. And we see from the way that Achimelech, the head of the city, he relates to David. We see how already the tension is building in the country. People know that David is a suspicious character. David and Shaul's relationship is not what it should be. Now, it's interesting to think about this in terms of modern times, because if this was modern times and that whole episode of Rosh Chodesh happened, where Shaul has this big lashing out at his son, and this whole big public thing about killing Ben Yishai and cursing out his son and all this, that would have been on TV, you know what I mean? But because of the fact that this is not modern times, the people didn't know this. However, they did know that something was up. So David gets to the city of Nov, And the first thing we see is Vayecherad Achimelech L'krat David. He is shaking, he's fearful, he's worried, he's suspicious of what's going on. Why? David comes alone to the city. And now that might not seem like such a strange thing, but if you're the king's son-in-law and you're royal and you have all this thing, you should be coming with an entourage, right? You shouldn't be coming alone. So Achimelech is already suspicious, and David knows this. So he makes up a story for Achimelech. He tells him, no, the king just sent me on a secret mission. I didn't have time to gather up, my troops and do everything. I need bread, right? He asked him for bread, and he tells him, I only have the lechem kodesh, lechem apanim. Are you holy? Again, this idea of holy and eating. He gives him the bread. He tells him, yeah, I'm fine. You can eat the bread. And then he asks him, and then we have a little interjection here. Bisham ish ma'avdei Shaul bayom hahu ne'etzad lefnei Hashem u'shmo doeg ha'edomi avir haro'im asher leShaul. Doeg ha'edomi is there. Now, this seems like a trivial piece of information, but it's going to be very crucial later on. So keep that in your mind. Doeg ha'edomi is one of the advisors of Shaul, and he's there, and he sees this whole episode. He sees Achimelech and David's interaction, and then we see, which is, if you are an advisor of Shaul, if you are someone on the side of Shaul and you see this is a big red flag. He says, David asks Achimelech, do you have yesh po tachat yadecha chanit o charev ki gam chadbi v'gam keli lo akachti bayadi ki hayad davar hamelech nachutz. He says, do you happen to have any sword or weapon here? Because it was so urgent, I wasn't able to get have weapons. And I have Goliath's sword that you killed in Emek Ha'ela. Now, this is first of all a very telling thing, because as we saw in the beginning of the book, when the Plishtim captured the Aron and they put it in Bet Dagon, this was a common practice in the ancient times, that when you defeated an enemy, you would put their god or something, the symbol, like here, they took sort of the Aron as the symbol of God and put it with their god Dagon. And here we took the head of Goliath as a symbol of our victory, and we put it in the Mishkan, because it was a symbol of thanks to God that He helped us fight. He helped us be victorious. So now he takes that. There's no sword like that. Give it to me. So now David is taking the whole Goliath story, as we spoke about last time, or whatever, a different time we spoke about Goliath, was the turning point where Shaul started to get his paranoia. So now David is having this sword. He has this trigger of the paranoia, the whole beginning of the story, and he takes it with him. Now he runs to, very quickly, we're going to come back to this, the idea of the story of the Plishtim after, but he runs after to Achish Melech Ga, because he thinks that this could help him, and that Shaul would never go look for him in the Plishtim, and the Plishtim would help him because of Shaul. They hate Shaul also. However, as he goes into the city, he hears very quickly that the people are saying, oh, is that David? Like, they're murmuring, didn't he kill all the Plishtim? And now he realizes this was not the right decision. This was not the right moment. As I said before, they don't necessarily know exactly the level of what's going on between him and Shaul. So now he's just looked at as an enemy of the Plishtim, and he realizes he quickly needs to save himself. So he decides to make himself like a crazy person. And it talks about the fact that he started drooling, and he started doing all these weird weird motions and weird things to make himself look crazy. And when Achish sees him, he says, he just kicks him out, because he's saying, he was acting so crazy that he just tells him, get out, I don't want to deal with this. And we're going to remember this story, because David does go back to the Plishtim later, and he is accepted. So we'll see what changes through the development of this story and later on after, because there's going to be a big transition of how bad this relationship and this dynamic is going to get with Shaul and David. So now he runs to after. So again, we're going a lot of places, right? So now he gets to Marat Adulam, and which is in the desert, in the Shvela. I actually asked my friend Adele Shabbat, if any of you know her, she's a tour guide, and I asked her, what's so significant in Marat Adulam? And she said, what's interesting is there is where a lot of the Bar Kochva caves are. It has a very I didn't remember the name, but it's a very the soil and the rocks there are very soft, so it's easy to make tunnels. So it's a very ideal place to hide. So he goes to Marat Adulam, and there his brothers and his brothers and his father and his family hear him that he's there, and they run to him. Now, why does his family go join him? Well, it could be for two reasons. One reason could be because they're his family and they want to help him. But another, also more logical reason, is that Shaul, in his craziness, could also fight and get revenge in his family. So they're also fearful of Shaul, so they're running to join him practically and also as support. They're also, ויתכווצו אליו כל איש מצוק וכל איש אשר לא נושא וכל איש מהנפש ויהי עליו לסד והיו עמו כ400 איש. So along with his family come basically the riffraff, kol mad nefesh, anyone who owed a debt, anyone who was stuck. And we'll see that that under Shaul, the economy and the financial situation was not ideal. There was a big divide between the haves and the have-nots, and these people seem to be the people that were not happy with the situation under Shaul, and it's about 400 people are with him. So it's just an interesting thing to know is that David sort of starts to become leader, but he becomes a leader of these not so refined people. But it's actually to credit of David that if he's able to control these people, which we see he will, then why wouldn't he be able to control the nation, which he obviously does? Now I'm actually gonna give credit to where the credits due. Moe actually mentioned to me that Moisa and that Marat Adulam is also where Yehuda, in the story of Yosef and his brothers, after Yosef is sold, he goes to Marat Adulam, Vayered me'et Echav, and that's where the whole Yehuda and Tamar story happens. It's all there, and he separates from his brothers. So I wasn't able to find so much on it, but what I connected, what I think is a good connection is that it's sort of a little bit like a mirror to that story in there where Yehuda was separated from his brothers and the family was divided, and he had to go through the whole challenge of Tamar's situation to open his eyes again, which I'll talk about maybe next week in relation to something else that happens to David. But and then that ends up transforming him to be the one who protects Binyamin. And when he goes down to Mitzrayim, this is sort of the opposite of that, where the family of David is united with him, and these people come to support him. And then David from Yehuda, from Sheva Yehuda, is the one that protects the king, Shaul, from Binyamin. Because we're going to see very soon that the people with him are very quick to want to kill Shaul, and rightfully so. But David is not going to let that happen, and we'll go more into that in a little while. So now David also, very interestingly enough, he then goes to Moab. Now this is interesting because it's also an enemy nation, but we see that because of the lineage of David from Ruth Moabiyah, he feels he's okay to go to Moab, and he actually leaves his parents in the hands of Moab because his parents, Yishai, his father especially, was told to be old, so he can't be running around like this. So he leaves him there, but we're going to see that doesn't end well. And later, when David does become king, this is going to be a point of contention for him. And through all this, we see a pasuk. We're going to see that this is sort of the theme of Shaul. He sees what's going on. He's always with the spear, with his sword, with his protection, and his avadim. He's always feeling this need for extra security. So now we're going to backtrack a minute, not backtrack, but revisit a story that happened with Nov, right? David was in Nov, and we see that Shaul hears about this whole story, and he sort of gives. I didn't bring the psukim in, but he basically gives a whole sob story to his advisors. Why is nobody helping me? Why does nobody like me? Why are you all helping Ben Yishai? Why are you all helping David? Why is nobody supporting me? He gives this whole sob paranoia story. And finally, Doeg speaks up and he says, I saw David, he says, I saw David with Achimelech. Now, it's interesting because Doeg sort of is saying this as a little bit way of protecting his own back and protecting his own skin, because he knows that he was the last one to see David. So if Shaul finds this out and that he didn't say anything until now, it's not going to be good for Doeg. So Doeg immediately decides, in order to protect myself, I'm going to throw Achimelech under the bus, which he does in a very, very dire way. Shaul calls Achimelech. He tells him, how could you do this? How could you save David? How could you help David? And he ends up basically condemning Achimelech and the whole city of Nob of the Kohanim to death. Now it's interesting because Achimelech, even though he sensed that this was something was not right, he never did anything blatantly outright. And I didn't bring his defense, but his defense is basically saying, he's the son-in-law of the king. I've helped him many times. Why should I think that anything is suspicious? Like, again, they didn't have media like we do now that they knew all this was going on. This was all being publicized very slowly. So Achimelech, even though he sensed something was off, like we said, it wasn't something so obvious. So he was justified in helping David. And we'll see that David, he ends up feeling guilt, which he should a little bit, about what happened. And I was reading, I think it was in Rav Bazak, about he said there was four circles of guilt in those who killed Nov. Actually, let me say what happened, and then I'll talk about that. So what happens is now Shaul condemns the city to death, and obviously no one wants to kill Kohanim. It's like you don't really want to kill the priests and the people connected to God. But he then calls upon Doeg, again feeling this guilt, not guilt, but feeling this fear for his own self. He goes out and he does it beyond the letter of the law. אפוד בד ואת נוב עיר הכהנים היכה לפי חרב, מאיש עד אישה, מעולל עד יונק ושור וחמור ושה לפי חרב. He totally annihilates the city. And this is the same language, by the way, which is so, so many commentators talk about this, but it's so blatant that you cannot discuss it. It's the exact language that was told in Amalek to kill everyone and everything, and Shaul doesn't do it. And here, it says like a misplaced aggression or misplaced goal, he then does it in the year of Kohanim. And Aviatar is the only one who survives, and he runs to David, because he knows that David and him are both enemies of Shaul now, so he goes to be together. Strength in numbers. Now again, I was saying there was those four that were guilty of killing of Nob. So one being obviously Doeg is the most obvious, he physically did it. We have Shaul, right, also. And then we have David, because he sort of inadvertently put Achimelech in that position. And then, which is interesting, the Chachamim also attributed to Eli and Chofni and Pinchas. Because of the sin of Chofni and Pinchas b'nei Eli, these Kohanim were predestined to be punished because of their sin. And this is all what happened as a result of those things. So now, hold on, where am I? Okay, so now David realizes, David hears this, he feels very bad about it. I didn't bring in Psukim, but he realizes this was a mistake, and he runs, and now he hears that the people of Keilah are being tortured by the Plishtim. So now the same way in the beginning we had the Hasha Ammoni was torturing Yabesh Gilad, there were these little battalions and things like that were infiltrating different parts. So now it's interesting to note that the Plishtim, we don't know necessarily, but did they know that Shaul was letting his guard down because he was focusing so much on David, so they took the advantage to start terrorizing the people again? Or they were just terrorizing the people, and Shaul, because he was so consumed with David, didn't step up as king? Because again, Shaul's role, or the king's role, was to protect the people, and he's not doing this. So we see here, again, like I was saying, mirroring this whole David, Yonatan, Shaul relationship, Shaul should be the one going to protect Keilah from the Plishtim, but David steps in and acts kingly where Shaul cannot. So we see that he asks God, which is a very interesting thing, It says, Eviatar brings the ephod, so he has the ability to ask God. And we see there's a big difference between David and Shaul, is that if you remember in the previous wars, Shaul was always jumping the gun and making his own decisions and not consulting with God. And David does the opposite. He's constantly asking God. He's constantly waiting for the responses of the Nevi'im and of the Kohanim and the Urim and the Ephod. Yes. Oh, also, I didn't say this before, but when there was one instance from Moab where Gad Hanavi tells David to leave, and we don't even have an introduction. We just say Gad Hanavi, and it's important to note that David was so connected to the Nevi'im and to the Word of God that we don't even need an introduction. He had this connection and support and he into to God. So also we see Shaul is always running after David, and God never lets him be successful. So back to Keilah. Keilah is getting tortured by the Plishtim, and David asks God, should I help them? And God says yes. So he goes to help them. However, he also knows, which is so interesting to see. I think this story of Keilah really gives the feel of the nation, because no Kohanim was destroyed. They see the craziness of Shaul and the fear that they have for Shaul, that even though David saves them from the Plishtim, he asks God, if I go save them, I get involved and I save them, will they turn me into Shaul? And God says, yes, they're going to turn you in. So even though David saves them and helps them, he gets turned into Shaul. They will turn him into Shaul, and he runs again. He saves them and runs away. So this is the whole dynamic of what's going on in the nation. The fear of Shaul, but the need to have David and his strength and supporting them. So now, after Keilah, we see that Yonatan meets with him again in Chorsha, in the desert as well. He meets with him in Chorsha, and he makes a declaration that he says, Atatim loch al Yisrael. He knows. We said that Shaul said this. Everyone knows this already, but they're verbalizing it at a different point. That Shaul noted this in the Seudat Rosh Chodesh, and now Yonatan tells him, "Tatim loch al Yisrael v'anochi yeh lecha lemishneh." You will be the king. I know this, and God should be with you. And don't fear, because God's going to help you. And Shaul will never, and my father will never, be able to get you. Anochi yeh lecha lemishneh v'gam Shaul avi yodea ken. Even my father knows what's going to be. And they have another brit, and Vayeshev David b'chorsha v'Yonatan halach lebeto. And I think this section, this psukim, it defines the character of Yonatan, and and this whole thing. We're going to see that it's a whole lesson in humility and knowing your place, because not in the sense of know your place, but in the sense of knowing your mission and knowing where you're meant to be. Because if you truly realize, if you truly know that this, whatever it may be, this is my mission, this is my calling, no one could take it away from me. So no matter how hard someone else is trying, I can't look at that as a threat, because if it's truly mine, if this ability or this job or this thing is truly mine, then I don't need to feel threatened. And we see that as well with Aharon and Moshe. Aharon is told v'samach belibo, right? He's happy in his heart. God is telling us he's happy that Moshe was the ruler, that Moshe took on that role, even though you would think, I know I'm jumping to Mitzrayim and I don't know Moshe, but even though you would think that Aharon was the one that was leading the nation for so many years in slavery, and Moshe was Kohen Midian, he was with Yitro and Midian for most of his life, that he sees that that's Moshe's job, and my job is to be the Kohen, and I take that. I respect that, and I embrace that. So too here, Yonatan should be fighting more than Shaul, if you think about it, again, because that's the threat. The threat is to Yonatan. So the fact that Yonatan is able to say with an open heart and with purity, to say, I'll be the Mishneh, I'll be your second, right? I know that you're meant to be king, and I'm going to be the one under you, that he tells him that, and Shaul avi yodea ken, So he's even saying Shaul knows this, but Shaul's response to this is, I'm going to fight it. I'm going to push back. I'm going to be the one to try to control and manipulate. And we see that's, the MO of Shaul is controlling and manipulation, whereas Yonatan is I'm going to respond and help and see how things are going to go, which is also David's tune as well, David's theme as well. So we see here, I'm going to stop in a minute here. I'm going to sum up here because it's too much to go any further right now. It's getting a little bit long. So, and it's a good place to end here. But basically, I want to wrap up where we are now by saying that this whole plight of David and Shaul and Yonatan is we see that David is he's going to do everything he can for he's going to do everything he can to protect himself, obviously. And Yonatan is going to sort of be this middleman. And again, we see it ended there, Yonatan halach lebeto, right? And again, we don't know if Yonatan would have came, how this would have ended up. Because essentially, Yonatan, I'm going to, spoiler, but you could read it, obviously, in Navi. Yonatan dies with Shaul. So essentially, by the fact that Yonatan is siding with Shaul, albeit he's helping David in some way, but the fact that he's still with Shaul is essentially what brings him to his death, right? He gets killed in the war with his father. And so we could sort of, you could always play the what if game, but it's just interesting to think that if Yonatan really did believe this, and he would have really left his father completely, which is, again, not a blame, because it's not something so easy to do, obviously, to leave as being the king's son, to leave. But he realizes this, and he does everything, so to speak, in his power to push it forward, and to help David. And David, now we're going to see, is at this constant. We're going to see that he doesn't know who to trust. Well, he doesn't know. He can't trust anyone because of what to know that people here, that even like when he saves Kayla, they're able to turn him over. So we're going to see in the next week, we're going to basically see the David continues to run from Shaul. Okay, and I'm going to not go and he gets into two situations, which we'll talk about next week more. But I want to just give a little cliffhanger type of thing. But or if you want to read forward in the Psukim, but he gets into two situations that seem very, very similar at first glance, that he's able to kill Shaul and he doesn't. However, when you look more into them, which we will do next week, there is a very significant difference. And the significant difference is what happens in the middle is an encounter with Abigail, who is one of my favorite characters in Tanakh, and how she changes him. So I hope my plan is that next week we'll finish all that running from Shaul, and essentially I don't know if we're going to get to it next week, but very soon is going to be the death of Shaul and how that all rounds this whole situation. So if you have any questions, comments, thank you for coming, and I hope you enjoyed.
Thank you.